Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. I am so delighted everybody's here. I see a lot of familiar faces, my loyal members, and I see new faces. I'm so delighted that you're all here. My name is, just in case you don't know me, my name is Professor Kasamanakis. I'm also the coordinator of the Business Society. I teach the accounting classes. I teach accounting 1 and 2. And standing right beside me are my officers. It's Shalia, she's the president. And Shanna is our vice president, and they're true troopers, always helping me out in a time of need. I'm very glad about that. I just want to give special thanks to the ASAP program. They were very nice to help us out in paying for the refreshments that you're enjoying. And I really appreciate that, because without them, we would have nothing. You'll be hungry. Anyway, so let's start the meeting. I want to introduce to you Lindsay Bernard. Come on up. She is the project coordinator of the New York Public Interest Research Group. And she's going to talk a little bit about what the organization is all about. The acronym of what I just described is NYPIRG. This organization does a lot of good work. And she'll tell you all about it. And after she's done with that, then she's going to be talking about tenants and landlord rights. So let's give her another hand of applause and welcome her. She took a lot of time from her schedule to be here, so we really, really appreciate it. Okay, so
okay, cool. All right, so I'll turn on. I don't want it to interfere with that one and make that horrible microphone noise. All right, well, welcome everyone. My name is Lindsay, and as Professor Kasamanakis so lovely introduced me, I am the project coordinator for NYPIRG. NYPIRG stands for the New York Public Interest Research Group. We're located here at QCC and throughout 20 different universities and colleges in New York State, and we're a student empowerment nonprofit organization. So we work on quite a few different campaigns. We work on environmental issues, working on passing clean air legislation and promoting recycling locally. We work on hunger and homelessness rights and awareness, keeping higher education affordable. Maybe some of you have recognized me from, maybe you signed a petition with me, or perhaps you registered to vote with NYPIRG. We do registration every semester, and we also work, most importantly, on consumer rights, which is why I'm here to talk to you guys today. So as college students, young people emerging into soon to be the working world and leaving your homes and being out on your own for the first time, a really huge deal is where you're going to live. When I went to college, it was the first time I left my house, and I lived on the dorms, but there's no dorms here at QCC, and a lot of CUNY senior colleges don't have dorms also. So you guys need to be educated on your rights as a tenant and how to rent responsibly. So I'm here to tell you today about important things that you'll need to know when you're looking at finding a new apartment for yourself, and just to make sure that you don't get taken advantage of, like way too many people out there already. So I'm just going to take a really quick show of hands. How many of you currently live off campus, or not off campus, or out of your houses without your parents, or plan to before you graduate? Just raise your hands. Okay, so that's a pretty good amount of you that could really get some great information today. And also, for those of you who haven't moved out yet, one day, if you soon hope to, hopefully you find some of this helpful. Okay, so there's a lot of different issues that come up when you're renting, more than could be addressed in this workshop or any workshop. So you're dealing with bills, your budgets, shared expenses, personality conflicts with roommates. I know I have a lot of experience in that department. Your landlords, neighbors, leases, security deposits, housekeeping, cooking, groceries, and oh so many more. But the first thing you'll need to do is to find yourself an apartment. I really want you guys to be aware of, when you're looking for an apartment, I know I look on Craigslist, and Craigslist is a great resource of information to find places to rent. But you need to be really careful because there's a lot of scams out there. And myself, I have experience in in having scams on Craigslist where, the person that's renting out the place wants money before you can even look at it. Those are always scams. Don't fall for those, and be really careful when you're just looking for places to look at. When you finally find somewhere that fits your personality and fits the location you're looking for, you want to double check all of the utilities in the apartment. So this is including your sink, the faucets in the kitchen, bathroom. Is your working water running? Do you have a shower head in your bathroom? Really basic things like what's the water pressure like? Is your shower just going to be a trickle? You certainly don't want to live somewhere where that's the case. You want to check out all the appliances. It's your landlord's responsibility to provide you with a refrigerator and stove, oven, microwave. So if those things are provided for you, you want to make sure that they're in working order. Check out all the outlets. Is there like a buzzing that's happening? Do you guys hear that? Okay, I'm going to try and stand here. Hopefully it won't happen. It's horrible. Okay. You also want to check the outlets and light switches. Make sure they're all working. If one of the outlets gives off sparks when you plug something in, you definitely don't want to live there, or you want the landlord to fix it before you move in. You want to check out noise. Do your windows open and close? Do they lock? Do your doors lock? Can you get cell phone reception in the building? If you can't get cell phone reception, now it's off. Then it's shitty. You want to be able to call people from in your apartment. So who's responsible for snow removal? Visit your apartment during the day and at night. Ask questions about the other neighbors. How's the noise like? Make sure you get to know the building before you decide to live there. And lastly, you want to know, who's responsible for repairs and how timely are they taken care of. Okay, so you found the apartment of your dreams. It's time to sign an agreement that binds you to the property. So everyone needs to be familiar with leases and rental agreements and the differences between the two things. So true or false, if you have signed a rental agreement and you have not broken the agreement, your landlord cannot tell you to move out of your apartment until the term of the agreement is up. True or false? False. Exactly. So without a lease signed, a lease is a legal contract that's between you and your landlord that specifies both the responsibilities of both parties, and this is including rent, security, utilities, and everything else. A lease cannot be changed while it's in effect unless both parties agree to the changes. If you at any time break your lease, you're still liable for the rent for every month remaining in that lease. So you did something in September and your lease is good till January, you've got to pay all of those months, even if you've been vacated. By law, a lease must be written in plain language and in type that is big enough to read. I've seen leases that are written that you would need to put under a microscope to see what's there. So you want to make sure that if the landlord gives you something in extremely fine print, there's probably a reason behind that, and you want to check it out. And really, I can't encourage you enough to read and read and read your leases before you sign them. So leases are usually written by a landlord, and they serve as protection for both the tenants and the landlords. Landlords are usually unwilling to change their leases, but after spoken with, there's something you want to bring up, a change that you would like to see to the lease, you'd have to provide written changes and really talk with your landlord. Landlord's really not going to be open to this so much because they've made a huge investment in their property and they really don't want to risk losing tons of money from a bad tenant. So leases are there as a safeguard for both the tenants and the landlords. Okay, so a month-to-month tenant, so you don't have a lease, you're renting from somewhere month to month, and you want to know what your rights are and what that exactly means to you. So at any point in time in your month, you can be asked to vacate with a full calendar's notice. So in New York City, the requirement is that you get 30 days to vacate your building after your rent-to-rent agreement is over, or if the landlord asks you to do so. If a tenant will not accept, a landlord can also raise your rent for a month-to-month increase. But you have the right to refuse the increase, But in turn, the landlord can ask you to vacate, and again, you get 30 days to leave the building. A rental agreement, it does codify the terms and conditions of a month-to-month rental, but it's not a lease, and it doesn't give you the same amount of rights that a lease does when you sign it. Okay, so I'm going to read aloud some clauses, and I'm just going to ask you to raise your hand if you think what I read is enforceable after I read it, and then I'll tell you why it either is or is not enforceable by the lease as a binding contract. Okay, so a landlord must give you 30 days notice to vacate your lease. Is this enforceable? Okay, great. If the document is labeled lease, the clause is unenforceable and void. The landlord can ask you to vacate, but the tenant is not under any circumstances forced to leave until its lease expires. So your landlord cannot make you move out if you haven't broken the lease and you don't want to. You signed a lease for a specific amount of time through September through January. Your landlord asks you to leave in November, and you don't have to. As long as you have not broken the lease, you are documented that property, and you're allowed to stay there until your lease is over. Okay, question. If one of the several tenants on the lease leaves, the remaining roommates that are on the lease are liable for the entire rent. Is this enforceable? Yes. Okay. Very much so. Okay, so this is sometimes called a joint and several liability. So this means that if only like one tenant on the lease and that tenant leaves, but there are 3 people there, all 3 of you have to leave. So you don't have the right to stay at this place or take over the lease, unfortunately. Question. Tenants will not be allowed to sublet on leases. Is this enforceable? Correct. It is not enforceable. Tenants with leases who live in buildings with 4 or more apartments have the right to sublet. So if you have 4 rooms and there are 4 of you and one of you moves out, you have the right to sublet that space with the landlord's written advance consent, and the landlord cannot unreasonably hold consent. Landlords can withhold consent to assign without cause. So the difference between subletting and assignment are a sublet means that someone's temporarily leaving their apartment, they're going to come back and they're on the lease. So they're going to rent out the space to their friend, but they're going to still be paying a portion of the rent, and their friend's going to pick up the other fees that are left. An assignment means one person who's on the lease totally leaves and finds someone to replace their leasing agreement, and that person then takes on all the interest and all of the fees that occur within that lease agreement. Okay, question. Is a landlord exempt from liability or injuries to persons or property on the lease? Okay. Okay, well this question's a little tricky because again, on your lease, there are provisions that landlords write into your leases that exempt them from being responsible for some injuries that may occur to you. So an example of that would be in my building. In my lease it says no one is allowed onto the roof of the building. Okay, so let's say my friends and I are up on the roof and my friend Joseph falls off of the roof and he cracks his head open in the cement and he dies. The building is totally not responsible for this guy falling off the roof. I broke the lease by going up on the roof. That guy dies, and there is nothing the building is responsible for. It's a very, very dramatic example. But the lease is there to provide the safety for the landlord. Oftentimes, if you read your leases, landlords don't hold themselves accountable for leaks of the people who live above you. So you need to be really, really careful when you're reading the lease to see what your landlord will pay for if you come into an injury and what they won't pay for. Okay, so the next topic is eviction. So none of us want to be evicted. So some of the ways you can avoid being evicted are to pay your rent and on time. If you don't pay your rent or you break your lease, then you may be evicted. All evictions should be and are required to be enforced by a sheriff or a marshal's office with a court order. A landlord can't just tell you to leave your apartment. If your landlord tells you to get out and they don't come with a lawyer, or not a lawyer, I'm sorry, a sheriff or a court-ordered mandate to have you evicted from the apartment, it's not official and you do not have to go anywhere. Also, if your landlord happens to change your locks without a court order, you should call the police because that is very much illegal. A landlord can, under no circumstances, keep your furniture in exchange for you not paying your rent. Not allowed. So there are also some rights that are guarded to you by law and by New York City, and any regulations can provide you additional rights. So you get some rights when it comes to roommates and apartment sharing by New York City. Yes? Okay, so if you go back on the lease, if the landlord gives you 30 days notice and your lease isn't up until, if they ask you to leave your apartment and they give you 30 days notice, but your lease is not over for another 4 months, you do not have to leave.
But what if your lease is over? That just says a month-to-month.
Okay, so it's a month-to-month agreement and they give you 30 days notice, then you must leave. But that's a rental agreement and not a lease. So if your lease is up in January and they tell you your lease is up in January, or even if they don't tell you, you should know when your lease is binding you to that property and you must leave at the end of your lease or at the end of your month-to-month agreement. And again, you don't get the same rights as you do with a month-to-month rental agreement as you do with a lease. Okay, so when you're sharing an apartment with people, and the lease that you're on only has one tenant on the lease, that one tenant is allotted primary residence, and then they're allowed to bring into their dependent children and spouses. And the landlord has to allow this, but the tenant is supposed to give the landlord a notice of the new occupants within 30 days of their move-in date, or at the landlord's request. So sometimes the landlord will want to know from the beginning if you plan on moving in with more than one of you. When a lease names more than one tenant, so there are 2 or more people on a lease, the tenants can share their apartment with their immediate families, and if any of the named tenant moves out, that tenant can be replaced, and then their families are allowed to move in also. Again, the tenant should be giving their landlord a 30 days notice or whatever the landlord requires as far as notice of when people will be moving in. Okay, so if the tenant named in a lease moves out and leaves the remaining occupant there, they must leave. So an example of this would be you're sharing an apartment with your girlfriend, boyfriend, you guys break up and your girlfriend was on the lease, and you want to remain living in the apartment. Unfortunately, you have no legal way to do so, and you must vacate the apartment if your significant other is the only person that was on the lease. If there are 2 of you on the lease and one of you leaves, you can find another person to fill that space as long as your landlord okays that. So there are some rules as far as New York City goes as to how many people can be living in an apartment at one time due to overcrowding in New York City. Some of the immediate family members, along with other people's families, so the tenants, 2 tenants per lease issues do get tricky. So I provided websites here, and I'll go over them again at the end of the workshop so you can know where to find that specific information about your specific borough and what their regulations are. Okay. So also, there are lots of cities and towns, particularly New York City, defines family in a very tricky way also. So, you're allotted to live with your family, but the term family doesn't describe a lot. So for more information about how to describe that if you're living with someone who you consider family, but isn't necessarily legally your family, that's something you need to speak to an attorney to. I have the Attorney General's website here. So again, at the end of the website, I'll go over that and what that means to you. Okay, so the next section is the warranty of habitability and duty of repair. So which is, as a tenant, your right to safe, clean, and livable conditions. So as a tenant, your landlord is responsible for making sure that your living environment is safe and clean. So some of the things that you can expect from these people are making sure that your electrical system is working and it's not a hazard to you in your apartment. You must have hot and cold water, heat. Your apartment should provide insect infestation and exterminators. In multiple apartment dwellings, so that means there are 3 or more rooms or apartments per building. The law specifically specifies there must be duties of repairs, and there must be set standards for the temperature of heat in your building. Okay, so you might want to pay very close attention to this if the heat in your building is never turned on or if it's way too hot. Okay, so heat controlled by a landlord has to be set to 68 degrees during the day, which is from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., whenever the temperature drops below 55 degrees outside. And it must be set to 55 degrees plus during the evening hours, which are from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., if it falls below 40 degrees outside. So those of you who've been living in freezing cold apartments, you have a right to bring this up with your landlord, and you should do so. There are public areas that you share with the rest of the tenants in the building. So those are hallways, your mailboxes. These must be clean and free of vermin, garbage, and other offensive material. And if these areas are not so, these are issues that you need to bring up with your landlord. Your landlord must maintain electrical, plumbing, sanitary, which is garbage removal, heating, ventilating system. So every, the fans in the bathroom that take out, hot air from the shower, those should be in place. Appliances, which are your fridge, microwaves if they provide them, oven/stoves. And the landlords must replace these when they're broken. There are also some regulations set by the city for hot water and the heat of the water that is delivered to your apartment. It needs to be 120 degrees. So you get 110 degrees is the set of a tub or shower, and all of your sinks and showers must have anti-scald shield, which means they get no hotter than 120 degrees and no cooler than 110 degrees for the hot water. In a multiple dwelling, so this is an apartment building, tenants have the right to pay for their own oil delivery or utility bills. So if right now your heat and your gas are included in your rent, you have the option to not have them included and pay for them yourself to make sure that you're not being overcharged. In that such a case, if your landlord does not do that for you, it does not include it and you're paying it on your own because it's not included in your rent, you can ask the landlord to pay for your utilities and include it in your rent if you would like to. The tenant, if not provided these things, can withhold rent from their landlord, but this is a last resort issue. You may sue for breach of warranty. So if your heat's not included, or if you don't want to have your heat included, that choice is up to you. I wouldn't recommend this. It's a last-ditch effort. Your landlord hasn't gone to you, because even if you take it to court, you're still going to be responsible for paying rent for the months that you're there. You might just be reimbursed for the cost of your electricity and your gas bill. So you're still always going to be held responsible in court for the amount of time that you were living in that place. So the judge can always order you a rent reduction if the court finds that your landlord violated the warranty of habitability. So that means, if your landlord never took the garbage out, your hallways were never swept, or your plumbing was always broken, your judge can definitely give you a rent reduction if those have occurred in your building. In an emergency, tenants may make repairs to their apartment on their own and then have that cost reducted from their rent or be reimbursed by their landlords. So let's say in an emergency, your locks were broken into and you needed immediately, it was Saturday afternoon and your super's not going to be in the building until Monday morning, and you immediately need to get your locks changed. It is totally a responsibility of your landlord to reimburse you for all of the funds that occurred because of that situation. So your lock's broken, you hired a locksmith, and it cost you $50 or more or whatever, and your landlord is required by law to pay you back for that expense. You should always keep receipts of those repairs because landlords won't be able to reimburse you if they don't know how much you actually cost. So always make sure you have receipts when you make repairs to your apartment yourself, your locks are broken into and you need to do something, your microwave breaks, you replace it, make sure you have the receipts for all of this so that you don't get screwed in the end. And then if you're having further issues, the best thing for you to do is call the local housing related agencies. So I'm going to show you the websites that you can go to. They're going to be up here for the whole presentation. But let me just show you. So the website that we're on right now is the Division of Housing and Community Renewal. So you can find lots of different things on this website. There's a lot of resources. You can click on the About Us section to learn what they're about and find out their contact information so that you know your rights and what is accessible to you. So the website is www.dhcr.state.ny.us. And it's all right here. Okay. This is also the Office of the Attorney General. So these are issues if you have, problems with your landlord not paying you back for any repairs that you made to your apartment. You want to check out this resource center website, and this is www.ag.ny.gov/com/. Another website that could be very helpful for you is www.housingnyc.com. And this can give you, a price index of operating costs, income and expense studies, everything that's listed here. And it could be a very great resource for you when you're looking for apartments or you need help in housing issues. You can also always go to the Department of Housing, Preservation, and Development for New York City, and that's under nyc.gov, and this is the website, and you can jot it down now if you would like to do so. Okay, and then the last one, this is the Queens County Court. It's in Jamaica on Sutphin Boulevard. If any of you ride the Q30, drives right past it on your way here. So this is their general information for local information. And again, if any of you want these websites more, feel free to come here at the end and you can click on them and check them out. Okay, so safety. Your landlord is also required to install smoke detectors in multiple dwellings within 10 feet of each bedroom. I know the apartment building that I live in definitely does not sponsor this, and that's something I'm going to bring up with my landlord right before I have to pay rent this month. There should also be carbon monoxide detectors in your buildings, and these should be in your apartment buildings and in all homes in New York City within 15 feet of each bedroom. So if you don't have these, your landlord is required by law to reimburse you for up to $25 for the amount of money that you spend on this carbon monoxide, and they'll give you up to $10 for the cost of smoke detector installation. So go ahead and install those in your buildings if you don't have them already, and get some money from your landlord for doing so, because it's important for you guys to be safe, and if there's a fire at night, you definitely want to be knowing about it. So these are just really minimal precautions that your landlord should be taking, to prevent criminal damages and harm, and they are definitely liable for these. So make sure you take these precautions as well. All multiple dwellings, so apartment buildings, must have self-closing, self-locking doors, and they should be kept locked at all times. So if your door doesn't lock automatically, if your locks are broken, that's definitely a legal issue excuse me, to bring up with your landlord. Excuse me. So also, apartment buildings with more than 8 units must provide an intercom slash buzz-in system. So you want to make sure you have one of those. And if you don't, bring them with your landlord. If your landlord isn't responsive, again, you have these websites to look to help you guide you through this process. You also have the right to add additional locks if you live in an apartment building with more than 8 apartments inside of it. Excuse me, that was very loud. Postal regulations that require that your landlords or your buildings require apartment buildings with 3 or more spaces to have a mailbox area. If not, the apartment building must make sure that they deliver all mail to every apartment every single day. That mail will be coming. Landlords in New York City have to install government-approved window guards in any apartment with children 10 years or younger. And if those are not in place, the tenants are required to have such guards installed. So there are some tenant organizations. So you have the right to organize in your building. So there's a problem in your building, all of the toilets have problems flushing, and you want to get together with everyone that lives in your building and complain about it, you have the right to do so. You can join, form, participate in these organizations, and they can meet in any common area in your building, whether it be a hallway, lobby, or anywhere in the building, as long as it's within a reasonable hour. Your landlord is totally prohibited from harassing or retaliating against these groups, or if they retaliate against you for exercising any of the rights that you have so far that I've listed. Landlords cannot seek to evict you solely because you've made complaints to a government agency about violations. So if they don't have smoke detectors, if your locks are broken, if they don't pick up the garbage and you make a complaint, they cannot seek action against you legally. They will get in very much trouble for that. They can't evict you because you've taken actions to protect your own rights under your lease, under their lease. And they can't evict you because you participated in a tenants organization. And tenants can collect damages from landlords who violate this law, which applies to all rental spaces except owner-occupied dwellings with 4 or less units. So that would be a house. If you have a landlord for a house, then that's not really included in these laws. You also have a right to privacy. You have a privacy in your own apartment, and landlords cannot enter your apartment without reasonable prior notice. You usually have to be given 24 hours notice before a landlord can enter your space. And it has to be at a necessary time. They can't just walk in at 1 in the morning and expect that you will let them in. And this is only to make necessary repairs, to show other people the apartment, or for reasons stated in the lease. So that they need to replace your refrigerator because it's not working. Those are the reasons that people can come in. In emergencies, such as a fire, the landlord may enter your apartment without the tenant's consent, but if it's not one of those other things, your landlord is not permitted into your space. I just want to go over some discrimination practices. So landlords must provide reasonable accommodations, so policies or rules to accommodate tenants' disability that don't cost extreme costs on the landlord's behalf or cause discomfort to other tenants. So some examples of these would be guide dogs. So if a landlord refuses animals to live on the property, if someone needs a guide dog, they have to be allowed to have it in their building. Also, lots of people need the handicap bars for the bathroom, like in the bathtub or near toilets, and you can get permits to install those, and your landlord must accept it, but they can, however, ask you to take them back and repair all damages after you move out. Landlords cannot refuse to rent or renew lease or otherwise discriminate against anyone because of race, creed, color, national origin, sexual orientation, disability, age, military status, marital status, or familial status. And again, NYC immigration status and gender identity are also protected under the housing laws. So outside of NYC, landlords with one or two family owner-occupied houses, so that would be somewhere on Long Island or upstate New York, they cannot discriminate based on race, but they have much greater latitude when setting other criteria such as sex, sexual orientation, disability, age, marital status, or familial status. So if you happen to live outside of New York City's area, you want to be careful because landlords have more rights in discriminating, which I don't understand why, and unfortunately I don't have the answers to that, but it's terrible, and I just want you all to be aware of that. Also, tenants who sue for discrimination and win can recover damages to any attorney fees that they've acquired over the course of suing their previous landlord. So there is some rent regulation in New York City. So I'm sure most of you have heard of what is called rent stabilization. So that applies to all of New York City, and it dates back to like the housing crises in the 1970s. And there's also some areas in Westchester and Nassau, but I'm just going to go over a little bit of the details for some of the buildings that have rent stabilization. So there are three categories to which a house can be or a rent is stabilized. So this is a building with 6 or more units in it, so an apartment building with 6 or more rooms or spaces that was built between the years of 1947 and 1973. So if those were built in that time, they have rent stability put in place on them, as well as buildings built before 1947, where the tenants have moved in after June 30th of 1974. Buildings with 3 or more units that were constructed or extensively renovated after January 1st of 1974 with special tax benefits also have rent stability. And to find out if your building has rent stability, you definitely want to ask the landlord and find out via one of these websites up here. I'm not particularly familiar with what qualifies other than the year specification for rent stability, so I can't answer any of your questions right away. But again, if you have questions about this section, you can let me know at the end of the workshop. So like the biggest benefits or effects of rent stability is that you have the right to renew your lease, and your landlord cannot make you leave when your lease is over. Your rent increases are limited, and they can only go up a certain amount if and when you renew your lease. So for as long as your lease is in place, your rent cannot change under rent stabilization. Okay, so for leases, a landlord must provide an initial lease of 1 to 2 years under rent stability, so you have a large chunk of time with rent stability than other times. And landlords must provide lease renewal 90 days prior to the end of your current lease. So that's 2 months before your lease, or 3 months, I'm sorry, before your, I think that's right, the math. Okay, I'm not very good at math. Before your lease, your renewal is notified to you. Primary tenants have the right to sublet with your landlord's advance written consent, as long as the primary tenant can prove that the apartment they're subletting has been their primary residence and that they intend to return. The landlord cannot unreasonably hold consent from someone else taking over the apartment. And this includes a couple of different family members that can lease the apartment with the same protections as the others that have lived under the rent stable conditions. And these include wife, son, daughter, stepson, stepdaughter, father, mother, okay, I'm sorry, this is going. Son, wife, daughter, stepson, stepdaughter, father, mother, stepfather, stepmother, brother, sister, grandfather, grandmother, grandson, granddaughter, father-in-law, mother-in-law, son-in-law, or daughter-in-law of the tenant that is on the lease. So basically, as long as you're not an aunt, uncle, or cousin of the person living in the lease, you're all good, and you can take over their rent-stable apartment. Another person who is residing in the tenant in the apartment as a primary resident who can prove emotional and financial commitment. So you've been taking care of this person for an odd number of years, but you're not actually related to them, can see if they can be included in the rent stabilization lease. Rent increases. There's only an allowable rate increase for 1 and 2 year renewables, and those are set each year by the local rent guidelines board. And again, those are all going to be listed on the websites that I have up here. And the landlord can permit improvements to the apartment, such as installing brand new appliances. So that's great. So let's just go over security deposits, and those always incur when you're moving to a new place. So your landlord has to return your security deposit to you unless anything has been broken on the lease, or you have created anything that would decrease the value of the apartment while you've been living there. So a thing that occurs a lot of times that are going to be fees that included in your security deposit are cleaning fees. So when you're moving out of your apartment, you want to make sure it is spotless, because you want those security deposits back. Because your landlord's opinion of what is clean could be like absolutely insane. So you just want to make sure you clean before you leave, and it'll help the next person out that moves in too. Okay. And your landlord can also use your security deposit as a reimbursement for any repairs that they have to do to your apartment, which is beyond normal wear and tear. So if any damages to the floors, the walls have occurred that you haven't fixed, and you haven't asked the super of your building to fix before you've moved out, your landlord will use your security deposit to put towards these repairs. And they'll take your security deposit if you fail to pay your rent. So if there's a lot of problems for young people who are renting, and especially for students in areas where it's a lot of student apartments, because there's a lot of different variations of what normal wear and tear are, and you just want to make sure that you're clear with your landlord what they expect to be normal wear and tear, and to make sure that you've taken care of the place well enough that you don't happen upon any of these. And before you sign your lease and you agree to move in, and you see that there's a huge stain on the carpet, or there's like a small problem with an outlet, or anything is broken, you want to be taking pictures of this, and you want to document it, and make sure you let your landlord know that this was here before you got here, and you're not responsible for the repairs that you'll have to do to the apartment. This is going to save you lots of money and hopefully a lot of headaches at the end when you just want your security deposit back. Your landlord is required by law to put your security deposit in a New York City bank account, and your interest, you're entitled to receive your security deposit along with any interest that it has incurred while it's been in the bank account, and you're allotted that when you move out. As long as you haven't damaged the property or you paid your rent, then you're entitled to your security deposit back with any interest that it's incurred. Again, landlords want to get a chunk of money from you at some point in time, so they can keep up to 1% of your deposit for administrative costs. They kind of make these up, which would be like, sending your rent checks or making sure we send the exterminator every month. Even though they're liable for maintaining the building, they can charge you up to 1% for any administrative costs that they don't have to specifically let you know about. And sometimes, unfortunately, this is exactly the amount of the cost of interest that you have incurred over the time that your security deposits have been sitting in the bank. So then you'll just get back your actual security deposit. If your building is sold while you're living in it, your landlord has to transfer all the security deposits, and you're still entitled to get that money back. And your new owner must honor the lease that was put in place by the previous owner of the property. If you want to safeguard your security deposit and you have rental inspection, again, that's just making sure you know your property. If there is anything damaged about the property, document it. And that's about it. So I just want to make sure you know all your rights. I'm going to give you the 1-800 number to the consumer complaint for the New York State Attorney General's office. I wish I had a marker, but I'll just read it out loud to you. And again, if you need any information, these websites are a resource of information. I'm located in the Student Union Room 6 in the NYPIRG office. If you have any questions at all about your rights, about NYPIRG, about any issues, we have a consumer advocacy excuse me, workshops that we hold, just like this one. And we also have a small claims court action center, so we can help you out if you have some trouble with your landlord. But again, the complaint number for consumers is 1-800-771-7755. And if any of you have further questions, feel free to ask me now, or come to my office at any time. I can give you an answer straight away from one of our consumer attorneys. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That was tremendous information. Everybody got something out of the information? How many attendants here? I'm just curious. How many attendants here? Okay, so I'm sure that the information provided was very, very valuable. At least it was for me. So thank you so much, Lindsay, for taking your time to speak with the students at Queensborough. Just wanted to remind everybody that we're going to have one more meeting. It'll be the last one for the semester, and it's going to be held next month, April 28th. And the topic is on email etiquette. So I hope you do join us. It's going to be in the M136. If you just walk across M136, that's where the meeting's going to be held. Same time, same day during the week on a Wednesday. So again, I think it's April 28th. Well, it's the last Wednesday of the month, whatever that date is, okay? So I hope you can all make it. And I want to thank everybody for coming here tonight. So if anybody has any questions, please stop by and ask Lindsay. Thank you. Thanks again.
Thank you, everyone.